Welcome to Agile to Agility podcast with Miljan, Bajic.
Major show alert!
The very first value we wrote is individuals and interactions.
Let's take this to another level.
If you want to have a successful transformation, you've got to address the contextual with what you're doing. You have to contextualize all these methods and all of these practices, and you need to operationalize your mindset.
Who is Jesse Fewell?
Wow. It's kind of an existential question.
That's what everybody says, and sometimes I even tell people this is what I'm going to ask you.
Yeah,
it trips people a little bit because it's like, hopefully you know you better. You know yourself better than I do, and well,
I got a couple of checklist items. So professionally speaking, I help change makers find the reward of driving results and impacting lives at the office. That's what I do professionally, as I mentor transformation leaders. And then wrapped around that are the people that influence me to be the me that does that. And so, I am a husband. I am a father of growing children that are, what do you call the children that are now like legal adults? I mean, they're not really children anymore, but they're my children. And they deeply impacted me. Last night, my son got his first professional offer for a software engineering job after university. And we're all celebrating the fact that's happened. And I took a look at it, and what it showed me was I am no longer the software engineering professional I was, goodness, almost a decade ago, that he is now aspiring to become. And so it's exciting for me to see him moving into a place that I have gradually evolved out of. And then the third checklist item that I think is somewhat relevant to what you and I have been talking about previously is I am a failed follower of Christ. And so I've regained an interest and a passion for a deeper spiritual journey. And that comes through spiral dynamics, integral theory. It comes through a fascinating bit of work by the Bible Project, and just rediscovering a non-dual, non-sectarian approach to a spiritual side of things, which absolutely relates to work. Absolutely.
Well, it's almost like when you said that, it's almost like we spend a lot of time focusing on things outside of ourselves and not focusing on ourselves. And I think it's just like anything else. It's more like inner work, right? Understanding, who I am, what do I believe in, how do I make sense of things? And for me, that was in a previous discussion that you and I had. We talked about like how our environment shapes us and how we see the world by environment that we're part of. And it's an interesting. So sorry to interrupt, but maybe we can explore that in a sense. How do we work on ourselves? Because most of the Agile community is working on others, but how can you help others if you don't help yourself, or if you don't understand yourself better?
Yeah, it's super critical, because if we are change makers, if we're the ones that are leading our colleagues to better ways of working, more competitive, more collaborative, more creative ways of working, then you're right. The distraction tends to be on the external about fixing them, and they don't get it, and they're not on board, and maybe because I'm the problem. In fact, this week I'm doing a talk for the Loud and Agile meetup. We are the reasons and transformations fail. We are the reason transformations fail.
Mm-hmm.
And we are also their greatest hope. And
Exactly. Yeah.
and so it's that kind of embracing the contradiction that I find to be fascinating right now. Confronting your own ego so that you can get out of your own way and bring your best holistic self to the work that you do, instead of always second guessing yourself, instead of chasing after somebody else's dream or somebody else's success. You know what? If I lower my standard of living by living abroad in a different economy, I may not need $1 bazillion to retire and be successful. So, yeah, I don't know if you've how much you've talked with Maria Montarelli, but I look up to her as a role model for how of life, redefining your lifestyle to fit the work that you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so for those of you who are listening who don't know, Maria Montarelli is an Agile global Agile thought leader who is founder of the Agile Marketing Academy, is the creator of the Agile Hero Summit, and several years ago sold off her belongings, her home and her apartment, and began living as a digital nomad across the world and across the US, and filming it on Instagram as a way to illustrate about how you can take control over your own professional environment. You don't need to be a slave to the paycheck. And you have inside of you, each of us have inside of us an inherent creativity to re-architect our lives and our jobs to be more fulfilling, more rewarding, and more sustainable, so that you don't burn out or bore out. So yeah. So shout out to you, Maria. You've always been a role model.
I'm gonna try to get her on the podcast too, because I've had her. Well, at least I've thought about bringing her, and also talking about she's been, pushing agile marketing, and just how agile marketing, along with other kind of industries, or marketing along with other industries, have tried to, and ways adopted some of these agile ways of working. But maybe to come back to Jesse, you recently posted a question in our community, like, what inspires you, what keeps you fire lit these days? So I'm going to turn this question back on you. Even though you shared it, I'm going to give you an opportunity maybe here to share what you shared, or maybe expand on it. But what inspires Jesse?
What inspires me, what gets me fired up, and actually where I'm wanting to move more and more of my life's work into this direction, is when regular everyday professionals break through their own limitations to greater impact. We're piloting right now a mentoring program, a cohort of everyday professionals. There's an operations manager, we have a PMO manager, there is an individual contributor who used to be a supervisor for a quality group at a chemical manufacturing company, but then she was asked, hey, could you just go explore what it would take for us to build a services business, because we're all product and we've never done that before. You have no budget, you have no headcount. Can you just go explore building a completely new business unit that's going to be the foundation of our future growth? And what? And that operations manager, she was thrown into a new role with no guidance on what her role was. And that PMO manager was marginalized for 2 years because her boss left. And so her boss's boss was like, yeah, I'm just going to ignore your team for the next 2 years. And don't you dare propose that maybe you could step up into your former boss's shoes. You're just totally not ready. And that's presumptuous. And so these are just 3 examples of the kinds of everyday people who, in a matter of weeks, with just a little bit of community support, a little bit of seeing through the eyes of possibility, they're totally generating amazing results. And that's what gets me fired up, is when average everyday people are overcoming the perceived constraints of their environment. I don't have a fancy title. I don't have a big budget. I don't have, or I only have 2 certifications. I don't have all of Jesse's certifications. And so I couldn't possibly start coaching my boss to be a more effective leader, which is what that operations manager is doing, and facilitate a dialogue across multiple departments about what a non-burnout culture might look like, or actually piloting a new service pilot with one of the existing clients, which is what that other woman is doing. So that's what gets me fired up, is seeing people breaking the rules of the conventional. And and so those are my examples. I gave a few examples that are out in the industry, but I'll let you kind of pick the ones that you find exciting and inspiring, because I wanted to share mine.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And like and maybe to tie it back to what we talked about earlier about like spiral dynamics, what motivates us and things like that. It's like, it feels so good, like, to see other people succeed, right? And like hearing those stories like that you described, like I've had like similar situations where people either have been conditioned, like we're all conditioned by a culture and how we work, and it's like people have certain beliefs around things that are so entrenched that it's like, well, how, like you said, how can I coach? I don't have all those skills. I can't do that. And actually see them break through those barriers is motivating to me as a coach and consultant. And maybe to come back to Maria's example, like there's no, a point, I'm sure you've been there, like where money is a factor up to the point where you want to live the lifestyle, whatever that you want to. But after that point, the return on happiness is diminishing, right? So it's, in spiral dynamics, or in general in cognitive development theory, the idea is that as you satisfy your needs, right, you're going to look more to self-actualization to probably fulfill other needs that are more internal than external. And to me, that's kind of when you talk about what inspires you, what motivates you, I can relate to that, because helping others is what inspires me, and what keeps me going, or what you said is always keeps your fire lit these days.
Yeah. And so one thing that's coming to my mind right now is you're talking about helping people achieve a higher order of awesomeness, a higher order of impact. What comes to my mind right now is cooks and chefs. And I wanted to just dwell on this a little bit. For those of you who haven't read the blog post, look it up. Miljan talks about that there's a difference between cooks and chefs, and there's a spectrum. And between the follow the recipe cook, which is like the grill dad. So I'm the dad on the grill and I'm following this recipe, and because that's what this right way to do it. You don't screw it up. As opposed to on the other end of the extreme, where you've probably got a 1-star, 2-star Michelin chef who's innovating completely new things that nobody's ever done before. And the metaphor really resonates with me, because in order to build a better work environment, in order to build a better organization, we have to empower, enable, equip all of those people, the people who are innovating and creating completely new techniques and new practices. Yeah, they get a lot of the press and they get a lot of the conference speaking gigs, and there's a place for that. So people who are, for example, like innovating new organizational design models, awesome. But then there's a few practitioners who are just like, just tell me what Scrum rules are, because I need to follow the Scrum rules. I've never done this before. I need a baseline. I need an anchor. I need some kind of a guideline. And then there's a lot of us who are just casting all the love towards the innovators and chefs and all the judgment at all the cooks and the beginners. And so I find that if we're going to be helpful, we need to be helpful to everyone where they are, rather than being agitated and frustrated about where they should be. And so that's my take on chefs and cooks.
Yeah, and you just made me think of, which I haven't written that or discussed in that article, but it's almost like there's this shift. And let's just say that COVID has pushed the environment towards like, hey, you know, we're going to cook more at home, right? So now you have a lot of people trying to figure out how to cook at home that they haven't. And then, you know, this pointing and judging would be like, you know, people that have cooked before, that are more experienced, you know, shedding all over people that don't know what the fuck they're doing and saying like, you know, look at these suckers, you know, they don't know what they're doing. And
You'll have to bleep that out later.
Yeah. But like, that's really, I think, you know, as our environment has moved into more and more of complexity, right? Or it's more and more complex. More and more people can't rely on frameworks, methodologies. They have to figure things out their own. But at the same time, I think that empathy, that patience with people that never done anything in that space is like, and this same thing happens. Earlier this week, I spoke with Dean Laughingwell, and you know, people shed over SAFe too. And I tell people, yeah, I mean, like, you know, in a sense, but there's a lot of good stuff. But if you have people that put in like, don't understand the patterns and what, you know, SAFe kind of encompasses, you know, bunch of different, you know, good and bad patterns and practices. If you're just taking it blindly, if you don't know what you're doing, it's almost like taking a recipe and just saying, we're going to apply it. You know, we're running we're going to have a wedding and we're just going to try to do it ourselves. Just understand that you're not going to be probably as successful as somebody that's done it before, and be okay with that and set the expectations to improve rather than use that as a.
So I've got my own observation about the scaled agile community and the state of where SAFe is at in the industry. And then I've also got my own conflicts with judgment and my own issues around holier than thou or agiler than thou kind of perspectives. But I view the scaled agile, the state of the scaled agile community and movement to be relatively exactly the same as where Scrum, the Scrum Alliance and the Scrum community and Scrum.org were roughly about 10 to 15 years ago. Because 10 to 15 years ago, there was the guru in Ken Schwaber and Jeff Sutherland. There was the official statement, which was one of their books. The Scrum Guide probably hadn't even roughly. It came out in the middle of this phase of the evolution, and there were the grand disciples, and everyone wanted to become one of their trainers. That's what the ultimate aspiration of being an agile champion was, to become one of the Illuminati in one of the high priests in this particular community. And everyone was casting judgment, all the Scrum people, because they were successful at capturing the mind share of the agile conversation. And the people that were usually upset about that were a lot of the extreme programming people, because rewind 10 years before that, in the late 90s, right about when the agile movement was starting to coalesce, they had all of the mind share, and their gurus were the ones getting all and everyone wanted to be the disciple and the heir apparent to Ron and Chet and Kent and all of those. And so there's this cascading wave of envy. And there's a cascading pattern of the guru who sets a template that people follow and receives criticism from all of the others who are not involved in that. And if you actually just go talk to these people, these gurus, They're just normal people.
Yeah, and
And
yeah, it's
and the thing about the fundamental contribution I think that Scaled Agile has done is it has created an agile option for the cultures that need an answer to every question before I do anything.
exactly.
And so for those of us who want to foster kind of a growth mindset, an agile mindset, that's just fingernails on a chalkboard, because we're trying to encourage leaning into the unknown and leaning into the not having an answer. But that's too big a leap for, statistically, a quarter of all professionals in all cultures and all environments, at least.
Well, that's, yeah. And maybe to bring it back to spiral dynamics and just that aspect too, or maybe Laloux's work, it's tough to, which is based on spiral dynamics, but it's tough for like amber or orange to jump 2 levels up, right? To like green or teal, right? So like a lot of times, like, especially like I tell people, like, look at government agencies. And I don't know how much you worked. I think you mentioned it.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Jesse. I'm based in Washington, D.C.
I was saying, like, we're screwed when it comes to government, because like the way that they're structured, the culture and everything. So like SAFE is something, a stepping stone, for instance, and even with SAFE, they're having a hard time. So like trying to promote, some of these other like,
here's an idea. How about we introduce sociocracy over at the Department of Defense?
Yeah.
How about we do that? Let's see how far that goes.
Not in our lifetime, I think, but exactly that. Like, so context matters. I don't know if you've like also maybe to go a little bit off topic, but like when I coach in Europe or in different cultures, like as a coach, as a consultant, my approach completely changes based on the context, based on the beliefs of people, based on their values. And I have to understand where they are, what they value, what they believe in, and change my approach based on that.
I just did a talk to the Scrum Summit 2021 this past weekend, which was it was a virtual event that was targeted to the South Asian market and the South Asian community. And in that talk, I went off on a little bit of a sidebar that was about culture and how do you measure and quantify culture. I'm a practitioner of the competing values framework. And so that with that framework, you can actually measure and visualize where your cultural bias is. And I took a little bit of a detour about that, about saying, well, you don't understand the Indian context, Jesse, or you don't understand the German culture and the German environment, because you're just an American with your very orange bias, right? and so I went to the Hofstede Insights and I did a couple of screenshots and I said, okay, let's just compare the 3 places that Jesse's lived as an expat in Germany, expat in Bangalore, India, and then as an American in all kinds of different American subcultures. And what's interesting is that, yes, indeed, there are these country-specific patterns. So, for example, in the United States, that scores off the charts on individualism, which means that the stereotype, right? Americans generally have no appreciation for the impact they have on each other. They have on others. They're very ethnocentric and very much focused on my department and my office, and I kind of forget about the other offices. And then in the Indian context, there's a big power distance measure, and that feeds the stereotype that says, well, Indians don't want to upset the hierarchy. And yet, when I was in Bangalore, I dealt with a ton of startups where they specifically recruited people that had a very creative culture and a mindset where they were yelling at their boss all day long. And it totally defied the stereotype. Likewise, here in DC, if you want to talk about individualism and competitiveness, the American innovation, and that I go into some offices where there are people that are just tell me what to do. I've been here for 20 years. I gave up 15 years ago, and I've been here 20 years. Just tell me what to do. And so there are, yes. And so the way I summarized it is your country culture informs your company culture. It does not define it. It is not your destiny. And so I don't know. Do you see a similar pattern, or do you
I
see
do,
different
and
patterns?
exactly, and like, so there are a couple of things maybe that we can explore. So now is the workforce becoming more global? What about if you have, you have team members from different type of cultures that are impacting your team culture? Because it definitely influences that. So there's that aspect of how does outside culture, the company, influence my company or my team? But then the other thing is that I look at is how you could have a team of, let's just say 7 people, 5 to 7 people, and each of those individuals is running what I call operating system in their head, or value system, or whatever it is, that might be different to each individual. So for Jesse, it might be like, screw it, like you said, I gave up 15 years ago. I'm just riding this agile wave because before agile was something else, and before that was something else. So I'm just gonna ride this wave. So you might have somebody like that that's disengaged. You might have somebody that's looking to retire. You might have somebody that's actually just wants to exceed and succeed, and that might be somebody that's more of the orange type of person, more of an achiever. And then you might have somebody that just wants to help others and see, like, what we started this conversation with. They really get fulfilled and satisfied by seeing others succeed. So how do you get group of people that are influenced by the outside cultures that are all around the world, where their company culture is shaping, and then their individual thought systems are different? So as a coach, when you go in, or a consultant, if you're ignorant to that systemic view of things influencing each other, then I think, at least when I started adjusting things as a coach based on those things, or those are some of the things, I find that like everybody gets more out of the relationship and the goals that we're trying to do by helping, first of all, understanding myself and helping understand from their perspectives, and empathizing with everybody's perspectives and needs, and understanding the cultures and how they impact. So I don't know if you look at it that way, or what is your approach? I mean, like,
So
when you're dealing with a situation like that.
Yesterday, I held 2 back-to-back workshops with 2 very different corporate cultures. One of them is a hardware company that has a Latin American CEO, an American leadership team, and German engineers. And so I was trying, I held a workshop explaining about how these are some role definitions, and they're a little bit different than your understanding of this. It might be, and so after a 10-minute presentation, thoughts, questions. Yeah, I don't think that's clear. I don't see it. Pin drop, crickets. Yeah, I'm not following. Would anybody else like to comment? And so we just had to move forward into the awkwardness. We had, that was a kind of an awkward matzo ball right there. Like, what are you gonna do? So, and so I just moved forward with the agenda and kind of continued and listened a little bit, and then reinforced, yeah, this is awkward. This is different. It's going to take repetition and acclimation. The very next hour, I did another workshop for a creative agency where people were joking with each other. They had Zoom backgrounds that were just hilarious. And they were like, oh, looks like Jesse's going to be preaching at us again today. and so it is completely different culture. So I could shift my energy from being one of patient encouragement to being one like, well, if you can't take it, don't dish it because here it comes. And so then I had to being a little
Yeah.
bit more playful and
Mhm.
energetic, and so that's it's kind of what leadership is. It's being authentic to
Mhm.
who you are, but also being sensitive to the people around you. And so, like, if you have a diverse culture of different kind of personalities and different countries represented, there's an assertive, accommodative, a yin yang kind of dynamic where, as the leader or a
Mhm.
coach, um, I assert a few things, but then I include what some of the unique elements that other people are bringing in. So as a coach, I defer to the dominant culture, but then I assert new information into that
Mhm.
conversation. As a leader, I might assert this is the core one, the singular core value that I believe in and I want to emphasize, and I'm going to leave space for everybody else to put their stuff in.
Mhm.
So, coaching is leadership, and effective
Mhm.
leadership involves coaching. But I think the nuance is where do you begin? Where's your starting point? So I like hearing your take on bringing different people together.
Well, that too, and it's like another thing that I've been trying to mess around and figure out is like, um, when does Milan become like that guy that pushes people, right? I don't know if you played sports, but like, I've had coaches where they're like piss you off, like in a sense, in order to get the most out of you, or just they just blindly, from a consulting standpoint, they say it in your face, right? Like, this is what you're doing wrong, right? And that might get some type of reaction. So like, um, I was talking, I mean, to Dean, to Mike Cohn, and like some of these, and both of them kind of said like, we tell organizations that if you don't have this, or you'll fail at the beginning, right? So it's almost like that shock, like, and there is some value in that. I don't know what your thoughts are. How do you
So you had a chat with Pete
interject?
Behrens. You had a chat with
Yeah,
Pete Behrens about that, and he also believes in when he invites people into his work leadership workshops. The first lesson is, here's why we're all here. This is all
yeah.
of the things that's going on in the industry. And the second lesson is, oh, and by the way, you're not up for it. And he has a way where he can do that. So you know what,
Yeah.
Miljan, this is an area where I think I need to grow. I
Mhm.
need to grow with a little bit more forceful truth telling. I tend to want so much to empathize and encourage that uh, my assertive energy is probably 90% inspirational rather than a little bit more challenging.
Well, that's the
And
thing, and this is exactly the same thing, like where our culture influences us, right? Like, in the United States, or generally in Western, it's like, be nice, like you don't want to offend people, and it's just say nice things even though you don't think them. And I had a student from Southern Italy that was saying like, here, like, if you're my friend and you don't tell me that this is messed up, like this sucks, we're gonna lose trust, right? And that same thing, like in a part of the Europe that I grew up, people will say like, if you're presenting something, or if they don't, they're like, this is shit, and like saying that, this is where the culture, like it's expected and normal in certain cultures, and in some cultures, it's kind of unacceptable or rude. So
interesting.
how do
Yeah.
you go,
So
like understand?
I guess that represents a growth area for
Yeah,
all of us. If you have an assertive bias,
yeah.
how can you grow a skill set to be accommodative at the right times, but still be yourself?
Mhm.
You don't want to be contrived or fake. I love what Brene Brown um, talked about in Dare to Lead about that authenticity, where you got to be yourself within boundaries. People don't need to know your deepest, darkest childhood secrets, and yet you do need to kind of share your opinions,
Mm-hmm.
and you do need to step outside of your comfort zone, in Jesse's case, to be a little bit more forceful with truth. But then be able to shift gears if somebody needs a little bit of encouragement. So it's a work in progress.
Yeah,
I'll admit it.
It's an art too, because you really have to read the context, be like, and maybe, you know, it comes with experience, but maybe let's switch gears a little bit, and maybe we can come back and tie it, but something that I thought we could talk about is in your book, Untapped Agility, the 7 leadership moves to take your transformation to the next level. You talk about attack culture and structure together.
Yes.
Could you maybe elaborate on that? And
oh man, so we're approaching we are in the 20th anniversary of the Agile movement. And if you zoom out over the last 20 years or 25 years, if you want to count the pre-manifesto activities, one of the patterns that shows up over and over is what I call Agile sectarianism. That we bunch up into these clusters and we throw judgment bombs at each other from, you know, like, your scaling model is evil, your scaling model is judgmental, and one of the ways that we sectarianize into groups is around whether a transformation should be about the mindset or about the methods. You know, you got to start with mindset first. You got to get people to a growth mindset, agile mindset, because no matter what practices you install, if you don't get that mindset locked down, it's not going to stick. Or, you know what? All those touchy feely foo-foo ninnies, they want to go talk about mindset over there. We're going to go do stuff. We're going to install best practices. We're going to start measuring. We're going to get very good results in ROI. And we never talked about why. We never talked about what is important. And so it turns into a bunch of noise. And so this has turned into, I saw one very large telecom spend $1 million on training of mindset. Lots of workshops, posters, surprise, a year later, nothing's changed. And that just agitated me. So I actually created a blog post almost 10 years ago called Culture Comes Last. Because at the time I was so frustrated by that. I was like, you need to start doing stuff. You can't be anything unless you're doing something. And then what I came to realize over the recent years is that can turn into an imbalance. And now you forgot to create the context, a narrative. And that's what leadership is, right? Leadership is about directing attention. And so that's the point in the book. The point in the book is that if you want to have a successful transformation, you've got to address the contextual with what you're doing. You have to contextualize all these methods and all of these practices, and you need to operationalize your mindset. I can't tell you how many times, again, Brene Brown covers this as well. How do we operationalize our core values? You put up 5 values up on a poster and put it around the office and just expect magic to happen. So that's kind of that's where the point of the book is going. What caught your attention about that?
Well, the reason that I bring it up, it's in the book that I'm writing, it's also part of the agile part is the structure part, and the agility is the culture. Right. So it's the full spectrum, you know, and like if you look at the logo behind me, the 4 quadrants of Integral, the left side, mindset and culture, is agility, or, you know, being agile. The right side is about doing agile. So what you just described is one group focusing on doing agile mostly. When we talk about softer stuff that's less, you know, measurable, like culture and mindset. So to me, you know, what that means is that attacking the whole integral, holistic way of looking at things rather than one versus another, which has been, like you said, you know, for most, it's been It's been between the right and left. And like I think last time we showed, but like Michael's book, Agile Transformation, is about this, in my opinion, new paradigm of looking at things holistically and combining, so it's this full spectrum, agile to agility, or more of a holistic way of doing things.
Yeah, and it builds on, so you mentioned Lelou earlier with the book Reinventing Organizations. When that book first came out, so everything's a journey.
Yeah.
Everything's a work in progress. When that book first came out, I thought it was utterly judgmental.
Really?
Like, you're going to categorize, oh, absolutely. You're going to categorize people into less evolved red and a kind of Neanderthal orange. And then there's us who are super enlightened teal, and we're all the way up here. And, it's just a matter of evolving your consciousness to a higher level. And then maybe someday you'll be as awesome as we are. And I was like, and so that's why the competing values framework resonated with me so much at the time, because it just put all of that on a flat grid and said, run a survey, ask the people where they are. And then you have a very democratic, non-judgmental saying, oh yeah, we absolutely believe in doing things right at the expense of anything else. So even if it means going slower, even if it means we clobber people's opinions, we do things right. And that is very much an amber, traditionalistic kind of follow the rules environment. But I wasn't ready to see it that way. And I think that there are a lot of people that latched onto that spiral dynamics concept and wanted everyone to jump 4 or 5 levels of consciousness right away. And if you weren't there, then you're not agile and you don't get it. And so, but now the breakthrough, which was even before Michael's book, I think, was what Shore and Larson are doing with the Agile Fluency Project, which is, which of these 5 cultures best describes yours? And for that culture, here's the next level of agility you should pursue. And I think it's genius because there's a non-judgmental element there to say, and it might be over the course of 5 years, 10 years, you might find yourself at another kind of culture after you've been investing a lot of this. Capital One is an example that has been working on their agile transformation for 10 years.
It's probably more than that.
And so they might have found themselves kind of shifting what their aspirations are once they go through certain things. So you're right. I think that integral model is incredibly powerful, but I had to grow into not just cognitively understanding it, but emotionally tolerating the idea that there is a predictable sequential journey. And for a lot of transformation champions, it's super agitating because I want to go get to this. I want to go get to a Ben and Jerry's culture right away. I don't want to have to go through all this other stuff.
Well, that's the thing. And like, it used to be easier because like the pace of change was slower. I think now, like, where there's misalignment between pace of change and how how we can keep up. And I think, one example just in the world is like, if you look at capitalism or just individualism, like if we keep going at this pace, we'll probably mess things up. But that's a separate topic. Maybe another thing that we thought we could explore is the myth of the agile coach. What do you have to say about
the myth of the agile coach? Here's the myth. The myth is that an agile transformation is directly contingent upon the effectiveness of a transformation is contingent upon the effectiveness of an agile coach. And I have found that to be completely untrue, unrelated, not even an issue. So the state of agile coaching report came out earlier this year, that found that put numbers to some common understandings around the fact that if you're an agile coach and you're working as a consultant, you're probably earning a little bit more than if you're working as an internal employee. If you're an agile coach, you probably have a certification, and there's a minority of those, a small number, that have what are called a master's certification, like your CEC or like the ICF PCC. These are high order coaching certs, and only a small number of them, but only a third of all agile coaches that responded even have a certification of any kind. And so that we kind of knew. But one of the things that I think is an emerging observation is that as an agile coach, you can help, but you're not the thing. And so I think there's a little bit of ego and a little bit of guilt that floats around, that they're going to screw it up unless I'm involved in everything. And the answer is, actually, they're going to screw it up even if you are involved. And then there's all this guilt, which is, oh man, I wasn't there and they screwed it up. Well, they would probably still have screwed it up if you were there. And I can't tell you, I've seen coaches that are just amazing transformational personalities, and the team or the leadership is, they're just not ready. Mm-hmm. And so it doesn't matter if you bring in Tony Robbins, it's like, and making all the C-level executives cry in the middle of a boardroom. Oh my gosh, you're totally right. I suck, and I'm a jerk, and I need to be given. Yeah. As soon as the meeting's over, the next day they come back and they're going to go back to old habits. It's just the nature of the journey. So that's the myth of the agile coach, is you're not the critical linchpin that you may have led yourself to believe you are. So lay off the guilt and swallow your ego.
And I think that's kind of coming back to cooks and chefs. For chefs, I talk about like the goal is to create more cooks and chefs, right? As a coach, internal or external, your job in organization, right, is to work yourself out of the job. So if I think like, hey, I'm coming into Jesse's organization and I'm going to teach them how am I going to get them to understand this recipe or to follow the recipe, I'll be screwed. Like, what I need to do is help Jesse's organization understand how they can come up with something that's delicious with whatever ingredients they have, right? And I think as coaches, a lot of times we're struggling with that because we want to, we're not necessarily developing people in a way we think like they rely on us, which is, I think, that part of that myth.
Yeah. I forget who, there was one of our colleagues, I forget who it was, but it was at a Scrum Alliance event. So, and they brought to my mind the English children's story of Nanny McPhee, who said to her children, to the children, she's a nanny, and so she was taking care of these children, and she says, when you want me to leave, that is when I will stay, and then when you want me to stay, that's when it's time for me to leave. And so there's that tension there that I thought was very intriguing. And so there comes a time where hopefully you outgrow your mentor. I've outgrown a few of my mentors in my career. It's weird where you could see yourself, wow, man, I really looked up to this person, and now I'm having to think about, why aren't they taking this step and that step and this step and that step? And I think that's a good thing. If you were able to be a catalyst for somebody else to where they're now even more effective. I mentioned my son. He just got an offer for his first job out of university that earns just as, almost pretty much as much, earning the same salary that I had after 18 years of experience. And that just brings me joy. So working yourself out of a job is a nice beginning, but then there's layers to that can get a little bit exciting.
Well, yeah, and through that growth and it kind of like, what what can we do to help others, keep those fires lit, I guess. So maybe it's crazy how time flies, and I know you have a meeting after this, so maybe what are some of the things from your book in general that you would like to share with listeners? Takeaway, anything that you think
Well,
would be
so
helpful?
there's a couple of things that if you want to learn more, then you can go to untappedagility.com and check out the book. There's a free excerpt. There's free templates and downloads at untappedagility.com, and it's available at all your favorite retailers. And so that might be interesting to you to help you kind of dig in and learn more. But if you want to take some steps forward in this mentoring relationship, if you want to break through your own barriers of self-limiting beliefs, go to agilevictory.com and book a chat with me. And we can talk more about what it looks like and what it takes. So untappedagility.com for more knowledge, and agilevictory.com for more results.